Greetings, fencers. So we're going to be in lockdown for another 2 weeks, so I decided to review some of the swords that we have, starting off with the faders. So also going to practice talking in front of the camera. There'll still be lots of video footage throughout the video. So the first fader I ever got was the Regenyei, and so this is the Regenyei made for PBT. This can actually be bought in Canada at Cross Swords Fencing in Winnipeg, and I'm sure it can be bought at other places as well. But it's nice to find a Regenyei supplier in Canada. So it's actually marked down as the stiff or heavy blade, and Regenyei makes 3 different types: light, medium, heavy. Light being really flexible, heavy being stiffer. And I've seen some clubs not allow heavy Regenyeis. They don't see them as safe. However, we have not had any feeling of that. We haven't ever seen this as unsafe. It does have, a bit of initial stiffness on a thrust, but the second you put actual force into it, it'll just bend all the way, just like any other sword. It is definitely stiffer than something like a Kvetun, which just bends effortlessly. Which I do appreciate a sword that isn't overly bendy. It reacts a lot better in the bind and isn't just hit around. I've actually had in tournaments someone just walk into my thrust and it kept the blade bent for a little bit after that. But eventually, just through sparring, it just bent the other way, and so now it's all fine. The blade has very little distal taper. It has a reasonable amount of profile taper. This leads to the edge being quite thick most of the way, and this allows me to have no fear just running my hand really quickly along it. There's no chance of bleeding or getting a burr. Regenyei is known for their edge durability, and this is no different. The edge will stay for quite a long period. Many people have 8-year-old Regenyeis that still have never needed to be fixed at the edge. The Schilt is a bit of a different choice. We've never had any problems with the pointy Schilt. It doesn't hurt any more than any other Schilt hitting into an arm or something, so it's not really a concern. The point of balance is about 3 inches, which is a little bit past the Schilt, and I personally prefer this. I like that the heavier point of balance gives it a bit more presence in the bind and really allows it to take control of swords that will a lot of times have 2 or 2.5 inch point of balance, and this leads to swords being really light and just hit aside very easily. So something like this will always take control of something like Kvetun or Sigi. It does mean that its tip doesn't move as fast and it will take longer in a thwart cut or something, but you'll be able to take control and hopefully wind in with a thrust far more easily. When I'm using a Kvetun, it just feels like it's getting pushed aside all the time. The handle is something I really like. It's wasted, it gets really thin at the cross and gets thicker up, and it conforms to a hand really nicely. And using stuff like leather gloves, bare hands, conings, this sword is definitely the nicest feeling sword out of all of them, just from the handle. It is something I really like, and it's a treat to hold. Now, if you're using spec heavies and sparring gloves, there is actually a slight problem of when your hands are stuck together with such huge deviations in where your fingers touch. I find fingers don't actually reach a solid hold and they're just barely touching the sword, and so that can actually be a bit of an issue with mitten style gloves. But with any finger glove, this is definitely what I'd like my sword to feel like. It's very easy to one-handed switch to thumb on the blade positions, and I especially like the little cutout that they did to allow it to happen even easier. The overall sword weight is only about 3 pounds, so it is quite a light sword for a full 50-inch sword. This is really light, and it allows me to make one-handed cuts safely, and I definitely don't get as tired using a sword like this as other swords. And so I appreciate that they really were able to get to a more historical weight of the long swords that we're using, and less of the closer to 4-pound weights of stuff a little bit closer to the Zweihander range. So, and this means I'm able to make one-handed cuts very easily. I don't really do Geislers with my left hand, but I do, when going in for the grapple, will cut, and I never feel like it's going to be an unsafe cut that I have no control over. I still have full control over the cut coming in for grappling, and it's really nice for that. The pommel is really big and nice and heavy, and this leads to a really good counterbalance. The pommel is very even with the cross guard and shield, and this allows it to really counterweight and always tip and go over the side. Some swords that I have held are quite heavier up here and have a lighter pommel, and this means that you're always having to force it with your right hand every time you cut. It doesn't swing itself. So this sword does swing itself, which is nice, and this makes it even easier to use one-handed. So overall, this sword is a really good sword that will last you a long period, and it is a little bit stiffer than some of the other types of swords. We don't running lunge at people when we thrust. We like to wind in and control our thrusts. So it is safe enough for what we do. Highly recommend it for a first sword. It's something that will last a lot longer, and a lot of lighter flexible swords really get bent up quite quickly. My Kvetun is retired now. It's not quite usable anymore. So I like a stiffer sword like this that I would feel comfortable taking anywhere, and it will always be good enough. So thanks for watching. Keep studying, keep practicing.